My name is Cameron Gray. I am a transportation and climate specialist with Community Environmental Council. Our nonprofit is based out of Santa Barbara, and we've been around for 47 years. In that time, we have focused on addressing the most pressing environmental issues of the day, and that means that presently we're very focused on programs and initiatives that are mitigating climate change and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So we have a number of different programs. Some of them focus on renewable energy, others focus on reducing plastics or increasing the sustainability of our food systems. But really the goal is to implement innovative solutions at the regional level, and we're often referred to as a think and do tank. So we're very much interested in driving innovative solutions and building partnerships that will facilitate that work. So today we're going to be talking about hydrogen and fuel cell vehicles. As I'm sure all of you are aware, that's what you signed up for. A couple things to keep in mind during the webinar. All attendees are muted. That means that you won't be able to speak over the phone during the presentation. But if you do have questions as we're going along, there's a Q&A feature that you can use. If you click that, it'll allow you to type up some questions. And what we'll do is at the end of the presentation, any questions that you've typed, I will respond to, or we'll have panelists respond to. We are joined today by 3 panelists who are going to be available in addition to myself to answer questions or speak a bit more about the regional work on hydrogen that we've been doing. The first panelist is Ben Ellenberger of the Santa Barbara County Air Pollution Control District. We also have Melissa Guys with us from Central Coast Clean Cities Coalition. Melissa is also a staff member at the San Luis Obispo County Air Pollution Control District. And we have Ivor John on the line as well. Ivor was very much involved in the Tri-County Hydrogen Readiness Plan, led up a lot of the work on that deliverables development. So it's great to have him on the line as well. So our nonprofit got involved with hydrogen about 1.5 years ago, and we had looked at hydrogen and fuel cell vehicles before that time, but there really wasn't an opportunity for regional action. The market for hydrogen and fuel cell vehicles just wasn't really there yet. And that changed when the Santa Barbara County Air Pollution Control District got a grant from the California Energy Commission. And that happened in late 2015. That's when the grant agreement was executed, and it funded work on a regional tri-county hydrogen readiness plan. And there were a number of partners who have been working with us on that plan's development. We were fortunate enough to get involved early on, and we did a lot of outreach and education about hydrogen and fuel cell vehicles. We also worked a great deal with UC Irvine. They did some very sophisticated mapping to identify regions where we're most likely to see a high demand for hydrogen in the future. These are areas where there is expected to be early adoption of fuel cell vehicles. So as you can see, these are some of the results from that mapping that the University of California, Irvine did. We see higher demand in the South Coast region of Santa Barbara County, as well as some very high anticipated demand in Ventura County. So Thousand Oaks, Moore Park, Simi Valley, Camarillo, those are all cities where we anticipate early adoption of fuel cell vehicles and where we think there's going to be a need for hydrogen fueling infrastructure in the near future. For San Luis Obispo County, we didn't see quite as high of anticipated early adoption for fuel cell vehicles, but it's important to keep in mind that this area is going to be an important connector. So people traveling along the US 101, if they want to get from Los Angeles to the Bay Area, having a station in San Luis Obispo County will help make that trip possible for fuel cell vehicle owners. Drivers who are in a fuel cell vehicle can make that trip currently, but it just kind of stretches the range of the vehicle to its limit. So it might cause some people to feel a little bit of concern as they're driving to, the last little bit of hydrogen in their tank before they reach the Bay Area, if they're driving up from Los Angeles or if they're driving from the Bay Area down to LA. Another thing that we did for the Tri-County Hydrogen Readiness Plan is we pieced together some resources that local governments can use to help streamline the permitting and planning for hydrogen fueling stations. In the past, there have been some hangups with quickly moving forward on the build out and construction of stations. That's not so much an issue right now. We've seen a lot of progress in terms of best practices for constructing stations, and the Tri-County Hydrogen Readiness Plan is going to have a nice compilation of resources that will really help local governments succeed if they are planning to bring a hydrogen station to their community. So in a minute here, we're going to dive into kind of the specifics of how fuel cell vehicles work and how hydrogen is produced. But I think to truly appreciate why we want these vehicles on the road, it's important to pull back and get a little bit of context. So I'm sure that for pretty much everyone on this webinar, it isn't going to be a surprise to hear that we are living in the midst of a changing climate. We see this with melting ice sheets, and we've also witnessed some of the first social and political events where climate change has kind of destabilized affairs and caused mass migration of people. We see this with, for example, the Syrian conflict, where drought became an additional stressor in that region and exacerbated already difficult social and political dynamics. And then here in California, we had the worst drought in recorded history over the last 5.5 years or so. This caused huge die-offs of trees and really created some significant wildfire potential in the region. And while we have gotten a fair amount of rain recently, the future is uncertain. We really don't know how many wet seasons like the one we've had this year we're going to see in the future. So this kind of begs the question. We know climate change is an issue, but where are the bulk of emissions coming from? This graph can help give us an answer. So it shows the electric power sector and transportation greenhouse gas emissions in the United States. And what we see is that in February 2016, greenhouse gas emissions from our nation's transportation sector exceeded emissions from the electric power sector for the first time since 1979. And the reason for this shift is pretty simple, actually. I mean, we've been really effective at reducing emissions from electricity generation in the United States thanks to renewables. It's been a lot more difficult, though, to reduce emissions from transportation. And we see this here in California. So in our state, transportation is the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions. About 37% of all the greenhouse gas emissions in the state do come from the movement of people or goods. And California leaders know that this is an issue. They really need to push down emissions in order to meet some of the long-term climate goals. And they've developed a number of different strategies for doing that. For example, reducing our reliance on petroleum, and also introducing cleaner, low or zero emission vehicle technologies. Also, another thing that they're doing is really pushing low carbon fuels like hydrogen. They want to see those come into use and help displace the petroleum that we are so reliant on currently. So this graph is a little bit complicated, but what I want people to take away from it is that we're really going to need to use every available tool and innovation that we have to meet our long-term climate change target. So California has committed to reduce emissions 80% below 1990 levels by 2050. This is an incredibly ambitious goal, and to get there, we're going to need a lot of different wedges to drive down emissions from their current level. So we're going to have to increase energy efficiency, continue to decarbonize electricity generation, promote smart growth in communities so that people are able to drive less and they'll be working and living in the same neighborhood. We're going to have to keep building out renewables and switching over to more low carbon fuels. And we're also going to have to really electrify the transportation sector. So this yellow bar here, a very large chunk of that particular wedge for driving down emissions actually is transportation electrification. So zero emission vehicles, which are running on electricity, including fuel cell vehicles. Fuel cell vehicles are actually using hydrogen to produce electricity, as you'll hear a bit later. We really are going to need those zero emission technologies to succeed. So now that we've got some context, let's take a look at the zero emission vehicles that are out there. There are two types of ZEVs, as we like to call them. The first type, which you're probably more familiar with, is the battery electric vehicle. Community Environmental Council, our nonprofit, has done a great deal of work over the last 5 years to accelerate regional adoption of electric vehicles. And we're pleased to say that the market outlook is good for electric vehicles right now. There are currently more than 250,000 plug-in EVs in California, and we've had 373,000 pre-orders for the Tesla Model 3 in the United States. And the Tesla Model 3, it's really exciting. It's really one of a new generation of electric vehicles that are going to have ranges above 200 miles, and they're going to be more affordable, starting around $30,000. So with these types of more affordable, high-range electric vehicles coming into the marketplace, a lot of experts believe that we're on the cusp of a major transportation revolution, and we're going to see wide-scale electrification of transportation. So the other type of zero-emission vehicle is the fuel cell electric vehicle. And this is a technology that a lot of people we've learned aren't very familiar with. As we've been doing education and outreach, one of the first questions we've been asked is, how do these things work? How do they actually move people down the road? And fortunately, the California Fuel Cell Partnership made a great video that can explain this. So we're going to cue that up in a second here, and it'll help kind of explain exactly how these vehicles work.
A fuel cell vehicle fills its tank at a hydrogen station. When you turn on the car, hydrogen goes into one side of the fuel cell stack and oxygen from the air goes into the other side. The hydrogen is naturally attracted to the oxygen, and as it moves towards it, the fuel cell separates the hydrogen molecule into electrons and protons. The protons move through the fuel stack membrane, while the electrons follow an external circuit, delivering most of its energy to the electric motor, while remaining energy goes inside the cabin to power the air conditioner, sound system, windows, and other onboard devices. Once the electrons have generated enough electricity, they come back into the fuel cell stack to meet up with the protons and oxygen, forming a new molecule, water. A small amount of water vapor is released from the tailpipe of the vehicle with water so clean you can drink it. For more information about the California Fuel Cell Partnership, please visit us at cafcp.org and check us out on social media.
All right, so hopefully that gives everyone at least a rough sense of how these vehicles work. And while it may seem like these vehicle technologies are something out of the future, in fact, there are fuel cell vehicles available today. This is something else we've learned that many stakeholders at local governments and consumers were unaware of. Is that fuel cell vehicles are currently available. The Honda Clarity fuel cell vehicle just came out about a month ago. You may have seen some of the advertisements on TV for that particular model. It is following the Toyota Mirai into the fuel cell vehicle market. There are also fuel cell vehicles that were made available for lease by Hyundai and Mercedes-Benz. Those were on the market, I think, as of 2014. There are a number of other manufacturers who are going to be looking to introduce fuel cell vehicles into the market as well, sometime in the next 2 to 3 years. So we expect to see even more manufacturers making these types of vehicles available by 2020. Another important thing to keep in mind is that we have seen a number of transit demonstrations of fuel cell buses in California. So Alameda County Transit and the Sun Valley Transit line, they have piloted these hydrogen buses, and also Orange County recently announced that they are going to be bringing hydrogen buses to their fleet of transit operations. So that's really kind of noteworthy in that we see a lot of good applications for hydrogen for larger vehicle classes. So what this graph shows is on the y-axis, you have the weight classes for vehicles, and then on the x-axis, you have average miles per day traveled. And what we see is that as the size of vehicles go up, as their weight classes go up, the number of miles that they're driving per day also increases. So for battery electric applications, this can be a challenge. Larger vehicles that need to go longer distances, the range that the batteries provide may not allow them to meet their operational needs. Whereas hydrogen, which has a longer driving range, it can actually be a better fit for some of these larger vehicles. Now, of course, that could change if we see some advances in battery technology into the future. But right now, really, hydrogen is looking like the best application for larger vehicles in many cases. And this brings us to an important question. How do battery electric and fuel cell vehicles compare? In terms of their performance, we see that fuel cell vehicles get good fuel economy ratings. They're coming in at about 60 miles per gallon equivalent. However, that's not quite as strong as the mile per gallon equivalent ratings for electric vehicles. They get about 110 or 120 miles per gallon. The important thing to keep in mind, though, is that fuel cell vehicles are by far more fuel efficient than internal combustion engine vehicles. They get on average about 23 miles per gallon. So big advantages in terms of fuel economy for fuel cell vehicles. Probably the two biggest advantages for fuel cell vehicles are their driving range and the amount of time that it takes for fueling the vehicle. So you can fill the tank of a fuel cell vehicle in 3 to 5 minutes, and that tank of hydrogen is going to take you more than 300 miles. Comparatively, an electric vehicle is going to take anywhere from 12 hours to 20 to 30 minutes to recharge. Now, it's important to keep in mind that you can often recharge these vehicles at a fleet yard or at home overnight. So if you're not driving that vehicle more than its driving range in a given day, it probably is going to meet your operational needs. But the driving range for electric vehicles is definitely shorter than that for fuel cell vehicles right now. For most models that are pure battery electric, we're seeing around 100 to 120 miles of driving range. As I said earlier, though, we do expect that to go up in the coming year. We've already seen a couple vehicles that are affordable and have ranges of 200 plus miles. So probably the biggest disadvantage right now for hydrogen fuel cell vehicles is their cost. The starting price for fuel cell vehicles is around $60,000, and that's compared to battery electric vehicles here, assuming a starting price of about $30,000 on average for those. There are some incentives that are being offered to help push down the price of these zero-emission vehicles. There was a federal tax credit of $8,000 for fuel cell vehicles. Unfortunately, that expired at the end of last year, and it is unclear whether there will be a new federal tax credit that legislators bring into effect. However, there is still a California state rebate of between $5,000 and $7,000 for businesses or consumers who purchase a fuel cell vehicle. Now, there are some income eligibility requirements that came into effect recently. So if you're above a certain income level, you cannot get this rebate. For more information on that, we'll have a resource at the end, a website that you can go to learn more. Battery electric vehicles also have a number of incentives. Unlike hydrogen fuel cell vehicles, there is still a federal tax credit for battery electric vehicles. That's up to $7,500. The size of that tax credit is going to depend on the type of vehicle that you buy, as well as your tax liability. And then you have a California state rebate for battery electric vehicles, and that ranges from $2,500 to $4,500. And once again, that rebate is dependent upon a person being eligible, and the amount they get is going to depend on the type of battery electric vehicle that they purchase. So looking at the after incentive price range here, we see that fuel cell vehicles are still looking pretty expensive. Battery electric vehicles are fairly affordable. The manufacturers of fuel cell vehicles know that this higher price is a challenge, so they are offering additional incentives in many cases, things like early adopter discounts, for example. They're also really kind of leaning more towards leases. They're encouraging people who are interested in getting behind the wheel of a fuel cell vehicle to look at a lease option. And the leasing options are very affordable, about $200 to $300, depending on the model that you're looking at. Furthermore, manufacturers in some cases are offering free hydrogen fuel for the vehicle. So for example, Toyota is covering the fueling costs for drivers of their Mirai for the first 3 years. There is a cap on that. People can only get up to $15,000 in fuel, but that's a really big chunk of change. And if you factor that into the price of the vehicle, if you deduct that $15,000 of free fuel, you'll see that fuel cell vehicles are actually kind of becoming cost competitive with battery electric vehicles. So certainly something to keep in mind. Now, we're going to get into kind of the details of hydrogen, how the fuel's produced, what its advantages are in the second year. But first, let's kind of dive into the fueling station piece. So it's great that manufacturers are offering free fuel, but if you don't have a place where you can actually fill up your tank, it doesn't really matter if they're giving away free fuel. So it begs the question, what is the status of the hydrogen fueling network presently? Well, the state of California early on recognized that there's a chicken or egg problem with launching the hydrogen fueling market. Basically, in order to have a self-sustaining hydrogen fueling market, you have to have vehicles on the road. But to have vehicles on the road, you also have to have stations that are in operation. So to kind of address this chicken and egg issue, the state recognized that they needed to step in, and they have committed to provide up to $20 million of public investment per year until the first 100 hydrogen fueling stations are constructed here in California. So in a sense, the hydrogen fueling network is kind of like California's Field of Dreams. They're betting that if they build it, the drivers will come. So today, there are currently 26 hydrogen fueling stations in operation throughout the state. 15 stations are in development, and we anticipate that there are going to be more than 50 stations in operation by the end of 2017. Now, as you can see, most of the stations that are in operation or are being developed are clustered around our major metropolitan regions, so lots of stations in the Bay Area as well as Los Angeles. Now, if we zoom in on the Central Coast, we'll see that we do have a station in our region. It's located in Santa Barbara, and that station opened in May 2016. There's also a station that is currently in development in Thousand Oaks. So that will be the second hydrogen fueling station for our region. There have been a couple delays with that station's design, but we understand from the city that they are very much committed to bringing hydrogen to their community. So stay tuned for more information about that in the near future. So the state has made the decision to invest in hydrogen because it provides a number of advantages and benefits over other types of fuel. Probably the single biggest reason that the state has chosen to support hydrogen is that it reduces greenhouse gas emissions compared to gasoline, compressed natural gas, and other alternative fuels. So we're looking at about 30 to 60% reductions in greenhouse gas emissions if we're using hydrogen in a vehicle. It's true that electricity is going to achieve slightly higher greenhouse gas emission reductions, at least currently, but hydrogen is a definite second best. It's right behind electricity in terms of the emission reductions it can achieve, and it may get even cleaner in the future. So another big benefit is that hydrogen fuel cell vehicles can help us clear the air. When hydrogen is used in a fuel cell vehicle, as you heard earlier, it produces zero tailpipe emissions. The only byproduct is water vapor. And really, this is a really important benefit. We have a lot of communities in California that are suffering the negative effects of really dirty air. And the most vulnerable populations out there, this really affects their quality of life. So the elderly or young children, we can improve their health and well-being by getting more hydrogen fuel cell vehicles on the road. Hydrogen can also be produced domestically. We have everything that we need here in California to make hydrogen. We don't need to import anything. And so there are some real energy security opportunities out there. If we can increase the use of hydrogen, we can make our energy resources more secure. And another big benefit of hydrogen is that it can help us store renewable energy. So what this graph shows is the amount of generation that power plants have to create during a typical California day. And what we see is that in the middle of the day, when a lot of solar and wind energy is coming online, those power plants ramp way down. And then when the sun goes down, those power plants have to ramp way back up. So we have some very big swings in the power plant electricity curve here. And that is actually really expensive for utilities. It can cause a lot of grid management issues. And when it's expensive for utilities to manage the grid in this way, it also means it's expensive for ratepayers, for the people who are having to use electricity and pay the utility for it. So hydrogen has the potential to store some of that excess renewable energy that's being generated in the middle of the day. And that stored energy could then be deployed in the evening to kind of smooth out this curve. And that would help reduce costs for ratepayers and utilities if they were able to do that. So there are three ways that we can produce hydrogen right now. The first is electrolysis. That involves running electrical current through water to split off hydrogen atoms. Another pathway is gasification. That's a production pathway that we don't see used very often. It's not quite as efficient or cost-effective as the other pathways. By far, the most dominant production pathway for hydrogen is steam reformation of natural gas. So that involves splitting off hydrogen atoms from methane molecules using high-pressure steam. And I imagine I may have caught some of your attention there because, yes, it's true. We do actually produce the most amount of, or the largest quantity of hydrogen from natural gas, a fossil fuel. And this brings us to some of the challenges and issues that we're going to have to address moving forward if we're really going to see hydrogen reach its full potential. So renewable generation is definitely one of those challenges. The California Air Resources Board is very optimistic that by 2030, we'll be able to have 100% of hydrogen produced from renewable sources. That is an assumption that they have made. And, you know, it's interesting to look at where we are today, though. So right now, about 96% of all hydrogen is derived from fossil fuels like natural gas, oil, and coal. Only about 4% is being produced through probably the most effective renewable pathway right now, which is electrolysis. So while the promise is there, you know, we're certainly able to produce hydrogen from renewable sources. We haven't quite gotten to doing that on a large scale just yet. Oh, one other thing to keep in mind, actually, so even when we produce hydrogen from fossil fuels, from natural gas, for example, it is still going to have the greenhouse gas emission reduction benefits that I mentioned earlier. So that graph that showed the emissions for different fuels, the hydrogen that they were looking at in that analysis was actually produced from natural gas. So just because it's coming from a fossil fuel doesn't mean it can't deliver those greenhouse gas reduction benefits. Another big challenge for hydrogen is going to be shifting consumer perceptions. As we've done outreach for the Tri-County Hydrogen Readiness Plan, we have had a lot of people express concerns and fears about the safety of hydrogen. They have these images of the exploding Hindenburg blimp in their mind. And so we're really going to have to work to change their perceptions from the Hindenburg to this, which is safety down to science. Over 2 decades of engineering have gone into the fuel cell vehicles that are on our roads today. The vehicles are incredibly safe. It's one thing, though, for us to understand that, you know, a select few on a webinar. It's a very different thing for people understanding that on a widespread mass scale. So there's going to be a lot of work that manufacturers and local governments, other stakeholders are going to have to do to help people get a little more comfortable with the idea of hydrogen and fuel cell vehicles. As we mentioned earlier, vehicle costs are a real challenge for hydrogen right now. In order to have a hydrogen market that is robust and can sustain itself, we do need the number of vehicles on our roads to increase, but that's going to be difficult to do unless the cost comes down. Manufacturers are optimistic that we'll be able to make that happen in the future, but right now we can see that the cost for hydrogen is relatively high. So this x-axis is the cost for the vehicle as well as its operation. So that includes fueling costs and maintenance. We see that hydrogen's pretty far out there. It does have major greenhouse gas reduction benefits, but the price point is going to need to come down in order to really create a market that is self-sustaining. And the other kind of big market development challenge that we're going to see is just the cost of hydrogen fuel. So most experts believe that we would need hydrogen to cost the equivalent of about $6.07 per gallon. And this assumes that gasoline is at a price of about $2.80 per gallon. Right now, though, if we do the math, we can look at this photo from a hydrogen station here in Santa Barbara. It shows that the person who filled up at the pump paid about $16 per gallon equivalent. And this photo was taken in May 2016. So the price of hydrogen has come down a bit since this photo was taken. I think it's hovering around $12 per gallon equivalent right now, but still nowhere near that $6.07 price that a lot of experts believe we want to hit. So as we grow the market, as more vehicles come onto the road and more fuel is produced, it's very likely that that price is going to fall just because of the economies of scale that will come into play. But right now, that fueling cost is a challenge, and certainly something that we're going to be watching in the future. So that concludes our presentation on hydrogen. I hope it's been informative for all of you. I think it's worthwhile to end these things on a positive note. So this is a quote from a gentleman by the name of William James. He said, "Act as if what you do makes a difference." It does. And that is incredibly true, especially for us here in California. We have really embarked on a very bold and ambitious path to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in the state and address climate change. And the world is watching us to see if we can succeed at that while also creating a really robust and vibrant clean energy economy. And really, it's going to take all of us to achieve that outcome. No single person is going to be able to do it alone. It's going to take collective action. So just want to recognize everyone who has taken part in today's webinar. I really appreciate you being here, being engaged, taking the time to learn about hydrogen and fuel cell vehicles, which do provide a real and very promising path for reducing greenhouse gas emissions in the future. So I want to thank our partners for participating in today's webinar and also supporting the development of the Tri-County Hydrogen Readiness Plan, in particular the Santa Barbara County Air Pollution Control District. They led up this project and have just been really, really effective at kind of coordinating our team. Just want to really thank them for their efforts to bring hydrogen readiness planning to our region. Central Coast Clean Cities has been a longtime partner of our nonprofit. We're very grateful for their involvement, and also the Ventura County Air Pollution Control District. Their staff were not able to join us today, but they have been very much involved in the process of developing the Tri-County Hydrogen Readiness Plan. And of course, I want to thank the California Energy Commission. They have been incredibly gracious, trusting us to carry forward regional hydrogen readiness planning for the region. So with that, let's take a look at questions. I'm going to open it up to our panelists. I know we're running a bit over time here. That presentation actually ran a little longer than I thought it would. But let's see. So we've got one question from Andy. He says that I recently heard the Tri-County Hydrogen Readiness Plan was drafted and near completion. Can you please give us an update and let us know where we can download the final version when it is available? Ben, you want to unmute yourself so that you can speak to that? You were actually giving an update about that before the webinar started.
Yes, hello, this is Ben Ellenberger. Yeah, so Andy, we've submitted the draft to the California Energy Commission. They're reviewing it right now. We expect within a week or two, we'll receive comments back from them. And then once we've received those comments and addressed them, we can finalize it and post it on our website, and also share it with everyone else involved in the project.
All right. Anyone else have any questions that they want to type up and submit right now? As a reminder, you can do that using the Q&A feature on the webinar tool. All right, well, it looks like that's it for today. Once again, just want to thank everyone for taking the time to participate. Just so you are aware, this webinar will be posted. There will be a recorded version of it that's posted online, and we'll also be distributing that to the stakeholder list that we have so that they can basically review this resource in the future if they weren't able to attend the webinar today. So just greatly appreciative of your time, and look forward to continuing our work to implement the Tri-County Hydrogen Readiness Plan in the future. We did actually receive a grant from the California Energy Commission recently for zero emission vehicle readiness plan implementation. So we will be carrying the work forward from our Tri-County Hydrogen Readiness Plan in and actually it looks like Andy has another question. Can we please offer ideas on how to fill the gap between Santa Barbara and San Francisco? So Andy's referring to the gap in hydrogen fueling infrastructure between those two cities. Ivor, do you have any ideas on how we might do that, especially given the current kind of process that ARB and the Energy Commission are using to prioritize station build out?
Sure. Cam and Andy, that's I think one of the big issues that's come out of the planning work is initially we had really seen Ventura as the focal point in the area of most interest for building out the infrastructure because of potential markets. But the gap on the 101 freeway is clearly one that we became aware of and became more important as the study went on. So it became elevated in our priority to get something there in San Luis Obispo, somewhere between Arroyo Grande and Paso Robles, because it really does, we need it to, to mitigate the concerns of going from Santa Barbara to San Jose. Just as Cam said in the presentation, I've got a Mariah and I've made that trip now both ways about 4 times, and it is a stretch. You've got to drive carefully, and there's a little bit of anxiety, but it can be done. And then the Clarity, which is the Honda's vehicle, can do has a greater range than the Mariah, so they'll be more successful in making that trip. But the gap, how do we fill it? We are not currently being seen as an area of most favorable for funding based on the criteria that the state agencies are using. So I think anything we can do locally to demonstrate market interest and to demonstrate the need for that station and to go to the state and say, look, we really need this station, is going to help. And then if we can find any way to do fundraising to co-share or match the station costs, that's something that would also obviously be pretty important. So it's not an easy solution, but the other possibility is to think in terms of how can we get station costs down, and we're looking at different vendors, of the installers to see, is there any trend in station costs? For the smaller stations, can the costs be brought down in any way? But we still need substantial amount of money. So we don't have an easy solution at this point, Andy.
All right, well, looks like Andy has posted a response, kind of just a follow-up to that. He says, Caltrans Region 5 here in San Luis Obispo counties, the deputy director told me recently that they are going to put in a hydrogen station and will have 5 hydrogen vehicles. I asked them if they can help by making it publicly available. San Luis Obispo County APCD can help to put the group in touch with them. So that's very exciting news, Andy. I think that warrants some follow-up conversation. What I can do, if people have time, if maybe you want to talk about that, we can wrap up the webinar but hang on the line here, and I can move you over to a panelist, Andy, and then you can jump on the line and chat with us. So if that's desirable to folks, if people have time, we can go ahead and do that. But I think that concludes our webinar. So I'm going to close up our recording here. And once again, just want to thank everybody who took the time to join today for taking part. Greatly appreciate you being here, and I hope that we will be able to bring you in on future webinars in the future. Thanks so much.